Hello and welcome to Console Shock, retro and modern gaming chat with me, Trev, and as usual, Stu is joining me. Hey, Stu.
How you doing, Trev? How you doing?
Yeah, all right. Spent the last couple of days messing around on the Steam Deck, but yeah, how about you?
Yeah, good. Oh, I'm still addicted to Call of Duty, and I'm just trying to find other games to play to sort of stop me playing that.
Battlefield.
So, do you know what? Actually, you joke, but about 12 years ago, I bought Battlefield Bad Company 2, and and I looked on Steam and I put 11 minutes into it.
Was that the best one? Everyone speaks about the Bad Company one.
I think it's the best of the Bad Company ones, but I think there was only ever two. So I've started playing the campaign of Battlefield Bad Company 2, and I'm enjoying that, and that's good fun. Obviously, it feels very much like Call of Duty, so I haven't gone too far out of my comfort zone, but I think the
big thing with the Battlefield games is they've got a lot more like getting into an aeroplane or a tank and an entire missions where you do that, isn't it? Whereas Call of Duty, maybe you're in a turret for a few seconds, then you're going back to regular sort of FPS stuff. So that's kind of where you get the main difference, isn't it? I've only played 3 and 4, and I think I've got Battlefield Hardline that I never touched. Which is like, but you know, it's not a war. It's like you're cops. It's just like a cop show.
Do you know what?
Weird.
Battlefield Hardline is in COVID times. I think I've picked that up.
It's quite old now. Yeah, it's about 8 years old, I think. Yeah.
Oh, it's older than that on the Xbox on the Xbox One. It's actually a really, really good game. I think
it came out on the 360 as well. I think it was in that cross-gen era. Yeah, when the one was fairly new.
But
yeah,
I mean, I recommend that for 6 hours of solid. I can hear you typing, Trev. What are you typing?
It's 2015.
2015. Well, that's 9 years then.
I had to look it up. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? How old that's gotten all of a sudden. Yeah, I think it came out after Battlefield 4, and then we've had obviously there was Battlefield 1, wasn't there, like a few years ago, and then
I've lost the order. Battlefield 2042,
5 as well.
5.
Yeah. They're not really as focused on having a campaign though as. Well, I don't know if Call of Duty is focused on a campaign now, but even back in the day, it was more about the multiplayer with those games.
Battlefield was never a campaign game.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where I think the Bad Company and Hardline, they're more a little bit campaign sort of focused, and I definitely recommend playing Hardline and going for. I thought that was really good. It felt like sort of Miami Vice or
that's it,
Bad Boys game or something. It didn't really have had the Battlefield sort of moniker added to it. That wasn't really the right term.
Yeah, I'll dig it out at some point and give it a go. But to be honest, all I've been doing, touched upon it very, very briefly a minute ago, but I was just tinkering about with PS3 games or getting them to work on my Steam Deck.
Oh yeah,
which has been pretty fun. Yeah, I kind of abandoned sort of playing PS3 games on my Steam Deck because I got the Legion Go, and I knew that with the extra power the sort of Windows handhelds have, although it would have been like when I did have the ROG Ally for a little bit, it was that where I did it more. I knew that I probably should keep, any time I want to try and play a PS3 game under emulation, RPCS3 basically, I'll probably only really be able to do it well on like a ROG Ally or a Legion Go, and that's basically what I've been doing. But then there's the odd game that I play my Steam Deck more than the Legion Go. Probably, I'd even say, to be honest, it was just about 90% Steam Deck and about 10% Legion Go, really. So it wouldn't be great just to. That's the console I've always kind of got to hand. If sometimes I just want to break out like a fairly low key PS3 game, wouldn't it be great if I could get those running on the Steam Deck? So plus the last time I really played around with PS3 on a Steam Deck was the original model, not the OLED that I've got now, which is a shade slightly more powerful with sort of quicker RAM and all that stuff that it has, along with the screen, of course. So yeah, I've got a bunch of I've got RPCS3 set up and threw some games in there, and the ones that ran pretty much spot on were the sort of lighter weight PSN games. And weirdly enough, I do really enjoy playing some of those HD remasters that came out on PS3, like Ratchet and Clank Trilogy and Metal Gear Solid HD Collection. I mean, they run pretty much flawlessly, and people could just say, like, we'll just play the PS2 versions, But I do like, the additions that you got in those PS3 sort of remasters. So those run great under the Steam Deck. And some of the lightweight PSN stuff like Outrun Online Arcade and Afterburner Climax and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time Reshelled and things like that run really well on the Steam Deck. I did try, there was some heavier stuff that I did try. Like I thought Wipeout HD might have ran well, but it didn't run very well at all. It was like 25 frames a second. It was pretty much unplayable.
But Trev, haven't you got to think about this? That, did games really run that well on a normal PS3?
Well, yeah, that's a good point.
Were you thinking, oh my God, I'm only hitting 25 frames a second here? That's probably what you hit on the PS3.
Well, it depends on the game. I mean, something like Ridge Racer 7, that was 1080p, 60 frames a second. And that actually runs really well. That runs perfectly on the Steam Deck, oddly enough. Or you would think that might be a heavier game because it is 1080p and 60 frames a second, but that runs great. Soul Calibur 4 runs perfectly. Virtua Fighter 5. Obviously, these are all quite early games. A couple of football games, Pro Evo 2008 and 2009, both run perfect. So they're great on the Steam Deck. There are heavier games that I was able to play on the Legion Go, like even Grand Theft Auto 5 ran okay. You could play it fairly okay. Red Dead Redemption, but they wouldn't. You couldn't. It was single digit frame rates for those on the Steam Deck.
Yeah, not good.
Not a big deal with Grand Theft Auto 5. You can just download the PC version and it runs pretty well on the Steam Deck. But yeah. So if you're happy and all you really want to play is some of those PSN games, I think most PSN games will probably run really well if they're not particularly heavy on the Steam Deck. And some of the earlier games, apart from Wipeout HD, which was actually quite a big, that was another 1080p 60 frames a second PS3 game. There wasn't many of them, but Ridge Racer and Wipeout were two of them. In fact, actually, John Lineman did that amazing series on the PS3 like a year or two ago where he reviewed. He did a big long review of every PS3 game that ran at 1080p. There's like 2 or 3 parts he broke it down into. But if anybody's interested in that, they should go and check out John's DF video on that because if they really marketed the PS3, didn't they, initially as being a 1080p console. And obviously it wasn't eventually. Most of those games run way below that.
Quite funny.
But yeah.
With what was it with PlayStation? They'll always market it as 1080p. It doesn't really do it. And the same with the PS5. It's 4K. No, it says 8K on the box.
Yeah.
So, it can do 8K, like for the desktop, but you can't game at 8K. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
just ridiculous.
At best, there'll be some kind of upscaler. That's trying to get it up to 4K, and then I don't know if it will do up to 8K in terms of the PS5. On what its video output does. You're probably relying on the TV it's connected to take it from 4K to 8K, which introduces its own problems. So the PS3 was obviously there were some games that did run actually at 1080p. Not very well. Most of them, the exceptions were things like Wipeout HD and Ridge Racer 7, which still look brilliant to this day. But yeah, really, I mean, by the end of the generation, you have games that were running under 720p. And then, that'd get bumped up to 720 with the internal scaler and then back out to your TV. But, we weren't necessarily all gaming on 1080p screens in those days. We might have had sort of those HD-ready TVs that were really sort of 720. But yeah, nothing has changed there. Like you say, whatever the biggest resolution you can get, you're not likely to be playing games natively at that. And that does actually put us into the line of sort of conversation that we were going to be talking about today. It also got announced, a couple of weeks ago. There were rumours, and we did talk about it in a previous show, what it might be and how it could work. But yeah, the PS5 Pro did get announced at the wonderful price of £700.
Yes.
So yeah, what are your initial thoughts on it, Stu?
Well, I'm a little bit torn because it is a big number. It is a big number, and
so you're a bit like you're a bit like Natalie Imbruglia.
I'm torn.
Yeah.
Anyway, I won't hum the
bad
song.
joke.
I won't hum the song. I don't want to be like Neighbours. Anyway, in my opinion, I've said this before, is if you want a more powerful computer, or a games console, if you want to have more performance and all these bells and whistles and ray tracing and performance and graphics mode all combined, then that's got to come as a price to it. And you brought up the actually maybe we'll talk about this later, but so it is difficult, and I won't buy one because I don't want one at the moment, and it's not something I'm thinking about getting. But it does seem like, well, if you want more power, if you want more, then it's going to cost more. And I think it's a lot of people are going, oh, I haven't got £700 to pay. Oh, that's too much. I've already got a PlayStation 5 that cost me £500 or £450 or whatever it was. Then I can buy loads of games for that. Well, it's not for you, and it's a little bit of a, well, you haven't got the money, you can't afford to buy it, but you can't have good technology and hyper great performance without a price tag attached to it. And and if you want a super duper PC that's got a 4090 and 64 gig of RAM and all, and the top 13th gen processor, whatever it is, and if you want that, you have to spend $3,000 on a PC.
Yeah,
there isn't a fact that, well, it should be £500 because they've always been £500. But it is a quite a sort of hefty price. And the point I was going to make about the PS3 was when that came out, was it $499, something like that? And that price, adjusted for inflation, actually cost more than what
it would have done. Yeah, that's right.
It did. So than what the what the
about
PS5 Pro costs. Yeah, potentially. And some other consoles, I think they showed a table of, it was something like the 2600 or something. Or maybe I'll bring this up before I start quoting prices of consoles. But
I think the only kind of thing that you can nitpick at if someone brought that up as an argument to sort of defend the PS5 Pro. Those previous consoles that were expensive got cheaper as time went on. A PS3 was ultimately, probably for most of its lifespan, was about £300. In the sort of 10 years, it was like a platform that was like a relevant sort of platform. It wasn't necessarily the PS4 came out at one point during that time lifespan, but it was like 200. It was probably close to £200. When the PS4 arrived. Whereas you can probably, this will probably stay £700 right through to, probably beyond the PS6 being out. I mean, I think I'm probably not quite as measured as you are with it. I think it's silly. I think it's priced pretty sillily. I get it. It's, you could argue that you're right in the sense that this is better technology, so you got to pay for it. I think, there's no argument against that, but I'm not sure if it's really needed, to be honest. I mean, the PS4 Pro, I don't think was super essential already, but I could see where they were coming from. In 4K TVs had just started to become mainstream. The consoles that they'd released only 3 years previous to that weren't really equipped to take advantage of them. They didn't really consider anything past 1080p at that point, and these 4K TVs took over. So Microsoft and Sony, at this point in time, thought, let's try and boost up the power of these consoles and have them take advantage of these 4K screens, and someone could, you'd have a better time telling the difference between a really well done 4K PS4 Pro game, even one that's been upscaled well, like the checkerboard, rendering that it would do, versus the 1080p version that's sort of stuck on your regular PS4. And then the jump in price wasn't as big. I think it's about a couple £100 more. I think it was more like sort of 450, 499 the PS4 Pro versus the 350 of the PS4. So price wise, people are like, well, it's more expensive, but it's not. We're not getting to PC territory, not at all. So people were able to swallow that, and like I said, there was kind of more of a need because of 4K TVs being a thing.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because the PS4 and the Xbox One were notoriously, they came out sort of a little bit undercooked.
Yeah, there was that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So then having the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, they were both. They sort of felt like, necessary upgrades to get them to where they are. But then I feel that the PlayStation 5 and then the Xbox Series X, they're both. Well, when I play them, I'm not going. Well, actually, God, I wish they were a little bit better. I don't think people were asking for a Pro machine.
I don't think so. No, I mean, it's also that you have to go to literally digital foundry levels of detail to really tell the difference. I mean, ray tracing does look great when it's done really well, but it doesn't really add anything to the gameplay. What adds something to the gameplay for me is a high frame rate, because you can feel when a game is more responsive, and you can see it as well, because if you put like a 30 frames a second game next to a 60 or above, you can instantly see there's a much better amount of smoothness in the other one. Whereas, the textures are a little bit better, there's better foliage in this level, the level of detail on the ground is a bit better. Do people really think, a huge amount of people, there are obviously going to be some people that do care about that. I'm not saying they don't exist, and they're the people that will buy it. But in terms of volume, to make it worth bringing something like that out, is there enough people that are really going to be bothered that, in Ratchet and Clank now, there'll be more, there'll be less popping in the very far off distant stuff, and maybe it'll run, a bit better it'll look a bit nicer on the TV that I was already using my regular PS5 on.
Well, I think what they're saying is that when you have a PS5 and you put the game in, you either choose performance mode, so that's going to be 60 frames a second, but you take a hit to the graphics clarity. Yeah. Or you would have the perfect graphics, but it'll run at 30 frames a second. So then what they're saying is with the PS5 Pro, you don't have to make that decision. Everything will have the good graphics and the good performance. Now, would you pay an extra £250 for that? I'm not sure.
It's a difficult thing to market as well, because they don't really want to say the PS5 is underpowered and that's why some games don't run great, because they still want people to buy that. And also they don't want to show off games that look bad, quote unquote bad, because the developers aren't going to be like, hey, what the hell are you doing, saying our game looked crap on your PS5? So they can't really say that either. They can't really say, hey, look at this stupid Ubisoft game. Now look what we've done. We've put it on PS5 Pro. It looks great. So we've made up for the crapness of the developer now with a bit more horsepower. So it's a weird. They can't really do that either. And you're relying on people looking at. I haven't seen much of the TV ads around. I'm sure there is, but you're going to be seeing these ads delivered over platforms that aren't really going to give you the best impression of the differences.
And that's what was it? Digital Foundry did their initial sort of feedback on it, and they were, I could, it's always, it might look a little bit better, or it does it, or well, and this was, looking at the feedback coming through the, YouTube's and compression, and then all of that, and it was actually like, well, they couldn't really tell the difference, and it wasn't until they actually maybe sort of sat down with it and thought, well, there is a slight difference here, but then it's quite funny because I think Happy Console Gamer he made a comment of like, well, I'm not going to buy one. I can't see the difference. It's not something I'm looking for. And and they brought out this new machine. But another point you hit on is since the 4 years or 3.5 years, actually probably 4 years since the PlayStation 5 has come out, it hasn't dropped. It hasn't dropped in price once.
No, and I don't think it will at this point.
So we're in a little bit of a weird sort of situation where, well, actually the consoles aren't reducing in pricing because I don't know, the economy or the way the chips are produced, or such high demand for chips that they can't hammer down the suppliers, or I'm not sure really the reason. But
I think the reason is they don't design their own silicon anymore. The PS5 was the cell processor. I mean, okay, they didn't do it on their own. They had IBM help them. PS3. Sorry, yeah. Well, PS1, 2, and 3, they're all basically homegrown designs, and so they were able to sort of figure out ways to squish those down and make them more efficient and cheaper to make, which meant that they were able to drop the prices because they were able to make it more efficient and cheaper to make them because they did them themselves. Whereas now they're just buying this stuff off AMD, so AMD don't really. They aren't in the sort of they're doing it with handhelds at the moment, but they're not really in there to try and shrink everything down and make it cheaper. So they're not getting discounts on any of this stuff. So Sony like, well, we can't really get the actual. We did get kind of a quote unquote slim PS5, though it isn't really. So it's most of the same volume as the original one in terms of the size, but. Yeah, they're not really getting these dramatic. I mean, think about the PS2 original versus the Slim. I mean, it's like a quarter of the size. It's incredible. To be fair, that probably did die off a little bit with the 7th gen of consoles. You didn't really get a tiny Xbox 360 or a tiny PS3. There also were slimmer models that came out, but they were still fairly chunky, weren't they? So I think the era of you getting like a much cheaper, tinier version of the original was gone by that point already, but you did get. They were cheaper, They were, like we were saying earlier, the PS3 was like £200 pretty much by the time the PS4 came out, so that was a huge drop in price. But they could, because they helped design the thing from the ground up, they could reduce the cost of everything. But now that isn't happening, and it probably won't from this point. I mean, you would probably expect if things were the way they used to be that by now the PS5. The standard version would be, I don't know, probably like 350 quid, or maybe even £300. But no, it's exactly the same.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, and that's what's not happening. And the good old days, like a PlayStation 2 would have been, it went down to £129, and it was just. It's a real sort of mass market thing. Where now, I think that a PlayStation, 5 has been £450 and then £700 for the Pro. It's something you've got to. Oh, hold on, this decision is going to take a little bit longer because of the price of it. What it did actually sort of trigger me to do, and so I looked on Facebook Marketplace, typed in PlayStation 5, and you can get second-hand PlayStation 5s for £300, £250, maybe a little bit more. And then I'm thinking, whoa, well, actually, that's. And I'm looking on Facebook now, and there's one in Croydon, still in a box, PlayStation 5 for £300 with the disc drive. So, and I'm thinking, well, hold on, I could buy that for £300, or get a slightly better frame rates or slightly better graphics for £700, brand new. And actually, it's a real value proposition to use a don't know, a sales term or something. But you know,
I don't know. I think that's quite a big jump. You know,
yeah, no,
exactly.
Yeah. You go £300. If someone said to you, "Oh, I've got a PlayStation 5, £300 or £250,"
I mean, that's how much it should
okay.
cost anyway. Really, I think the base model should be about 300 quid. You know, at this stage, yeah, brand new. So that's a decent that's a decent price for a PS5 console generally for what you get. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. That's like that's the price. You hit the nail on the head. That's the price it should be.
Yeah,
and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the price is what's kind of put me off. I mean, if it was like £300, I probably would think, you know, it's slightly more of a casual. Yeah, I'll grab one. There's a couple of games I'd like to play. I mean, my gaming habits have changed a lot, you know, in recent years. Like, I prefer to do everything on a handheld now because I just like to pick up and play. I don't really want to, you know. Well, it's different now. I could probably get one set up on I'll have a PS5 just permanently plugged into our living room TV, and I can grab the controller, can't I, and start playing. And I might have to put a disc in, but
actually, you mentioned disc. So what's your thoughts on £700 and no disc drive? So if you want a disc drive for it, it's another £100. So it's £800. So now they really feel like they're I don't know, trying to shortchange you by not giving you a disc drive.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense on the base model where there's a couple of options. Because there are some who don't care about having discs, and maybe they've already got a decent, digital Sony sort of PSN store library that they brought over from the PS4, and they didn't really buy discs then, and they know they're just going to keep buying digital copies of things, in the current gen, and so they can save a bit of money and get themselves the cheaper console. But I mean, personally, I would always prefer a disc version just because the games are so much cheaper, and you can resell them and get secondhand copies of things and all of that. So yeah, I mean, I thought for me it's the default, but for £700, you know, to not get a disc drive, which, you know, if you're quote unquote a pro level PS fan, you probably want every single option that you have available to you because you want the maximum super version of the console. That probably means you'd want the disc drive as well. So you can get your PSN games like just over PSN, and you can also buy a disc. So it's very strange, certainly at that price as well. It'd be a slightly better like to swallow if I think it still would have been expensive, even with the drive included for £700. But to not include it is insane. I mean, it would be useless to me because the PS4 games I do have that I'd want to play on it, which are the discs I still have lying around, I won't be able to use it on that system anyway, unless I bought the disc drive separately, which is I think that's another £100. Is it another £100 for the disc drive?
Something like that, yeah. Something, yeah, £120, or I have to double check, but yeah, it certainly costs more for the disc drive. Yeah, so it's just. I mean, I'm looking at it. I'm just trying to see where I think it's sold out everywhere. You know, the the Blu-ray drive. Yeah. So, but just to go on the console price adjusted for inflation page. So we're talking about $699 for the PlayStation 5 Pro in dollars. $699. So remember that number. The PlayStation 3 was $780 adjusted for inflation. So that was originally $499. Wow. What's another one that stands out? I'd
probably say the Sega Saturn was quite expensive.
Actually, yeah, I was just coming to that one. Sega Saturn, $825 dollars adjusted for inflation. Now you'll fall off your seat. The 3DO interactive multiplayer adjusted for inflation is $1,510.
That is insane.
But it did come with a CD drive.
I'd like to think it did. Yeah. You were a bit screwed in 1993. That one of them.
Exactly. The Atari 5200 was $864. adjusted for inflation.
But you could almost, in those days, you could almost justify. I mean, no one wanted to pay those prices, and that's perfect. No. That's the absolutely correct attitude to have. But you could probably justify it more in those days because those systems were, even in the case of the Atari 5200, were a huge leap over the, I guess, the mainstream consoles, the cheaper ones that the majority of people were buying, especially the 3DO. I mean, at that point in time, the Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo were the sort of mainstream consoles, and the 3DO was like a high-end PC, really. Although, people didn't really have gaming PCs in those days. People obviously gamed on them, but that wasn't. People weren't selling them for that purpose. It was kind of a byproduct, really, if they had to play games on them. But a 3DO would easily compare to a very high-end, PC that probably cost, a couple of grand in those days, with the 3D hardware that it was able, and it was many, many, many times more powerful than a Mega Drive or a Super Nintendo. And you've only got to put them side by side to see the sort of games that, obviously they didn't have great games, but what it did have, you'd be able to tell that it was more powerful. So you could probably justify the big leap in price then, probably more so with like a Sega Saturn, which had more sort of games that you would enjoy on it. Unfortunately, the PlayStation was also £100 cheaper, wasn't it? And that was a big factor.
Yes, that was $299.
Yeah, which wasn't cheap either. Which wasn't cheap at all. I had to wait until the PlayStation was £100 before I could buy one myself.
Well, if you look at it from that point of view, the PlayStation 1 was 613 adjusted for inflation. And then if you look at that compared to the original PlayStation 5, that came out at 499. So the PlayStation 1 was actually more expensive than the PlayStation 5. But what we're saying, where the difference is that the PlayStation 1, 2, 3, they drop down in price.
Oh, so huge, like extremely quickly as well. I mean, the PS1 dropping down.
Yeah, exactly. They were £129 or £99 at one point. So
it was $299 when it came out here in September '95, and you didn't. I don't think you even got a game. You got a demo disc and one controller. So you'd have to sort of pick up a game and a memory card. So it's not quite, it's a bit deceptive that price, but that's what it was. And then in '96, probably near the end of '96 or around summertime in '96, I think it dropped down to $199, which is a huge drop in price. And then I do remember this specifically because the N64 came out in March '97, and Sony chose that exact date to drop the PS1 down to 130 quid.
That's cheeky.
So by '97, the PS1 was the cost of like a Mega Drive was a few years earlier. But Sony were very good at sort of timing their price drops to really do some damage to their rivals. But the N64 was 250 quid in March '97 when that came out with no game. Whereas the PS1, I mean, by then you could get a bundle and probably get like Tekken or Ridge Racer with it and an extra controller. You probably get all of that for 150 quid by '97. So it was a fraction of the price, but we're obviously not seeing anything like those. We're not seeing any price drops. It's gone up since in terms of price since it was released. In the end of 2020. So it's a completely different time.
Exactly. And the same with the Xbox Series X. I think they've had it on sale maybe for £50 off, and the same with the Series S. They potentially bundled it with a game at one point.
But I think they've been a bit better, haven't they, like Microsoft with their sort of doing good deals. So
it's I mean the question is, Trev, I think the answer is, would you buy the PlayStation 5 Pro? I think your answer is no.
To be honest, if I had like 700 quid and I was going to get something PlayStation related, I'd probably rather put all of that towards getting the VR. Well, I don't know if the VR's kind of dying now, or is it already died? I wouldn't.
What about, here's an option. Would you get the PS5 Pro or the PS5 standard with the PS5 Portal?
I probably would do the latter. Yeah, get the standard PS5.
Yeah.
And with the portal, because then you've got yourself. I mean, obviously the portal is a bit crap, but it seems to do the job.
Well, do you know what? I mean, I don't want to make this about the portal, but
Yeah.
Friend of the show, John Linneman, he absolutely hates it, and it's always quite sort of funny him talking about it. Then other people, Metal Jesuses and other YouTubers absolutely love it, just because they're not looking, they're not. They can maybe not see some of the issues that John may have with it, and they actually enjoy sort of the flexibility of, okay, I'm just gonna chill out on the sofa, or sit in the back bedroom, or sit on the porch and and play a little bit of Astrobot or whatever. Then I think it's really got a place, but it has got its issues.
Well, here's like an interesting sort of dilemma you can add to that. I mean, I touched upon it a little bit, but you could you can go and CX, and you can get yourself just putting it a little basket together now. So you can get a PS5, just a boxed PS5. So presumably one that's in a bit better nick than you might get otherwise from CX. Regular PS5, 825 gig, boxed. That's £420. And then you can also get the PlayStation VR2 headsets with the Sense controllers. So the full set you need to be able to play VR2 games for £385. The total is £805, which again isn't brilliant value for money either. Really, it's definitely not cheap by any means. But if I had money burning a hole in my pocket in that range, £700 to £800, bear in mind that to get a kind of a similar setup to, if we're not counting the VR headset, we just want a PS5 Pro with a disc drive, you're going to hit £800 anyway. I would rather get a VR headset, and the regular PS5 for £805. I think that's from CEX. It's not all going to be brand new. Maybe there's a brand new bundle that is of a similar price, and you'd be better off doing that. But yeah, I would much rather, because you're genuinely going to get a different gameplay experience with the VR headset on its own, whereas the PS5 Pro, you're just getting a slightly better versions of games that you can already play that aren't going to be dramatically different to what you're used to, and obviously there's no VR without paying the £300 or nearly £400 for that separately. So yeah, I think that's what would you say to that kind of deal?
Well, I can, but that's where you're hitting the value points, because that's like, well, actually, you're getting the machine and then you're getting the VR headset. I mean, personally,
and you've got the disc drive.
Oh, and you got the disc drive, but you can make that deal even cheaper by going down the route of getting a online only PlayStation digital one. But
and you could probably shave more money off on I'm sure you can. You just said that you can get PS5s for like £300 off Facebook.
Off Facebook. So I can't honestly. I think I tried a PS VR2, and I literally, honestly, I thought after a minute I thought I was going to throw up. It was awful. It was it's not a.
Well, I had PSVR 1. That I used on actually my PS4 Pro, which I still have, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't play it constantly. I had a little spell where I did play it a lot over the course of probably a couple of years. Really, I haven't touched it for a while now. It's just a faff to set up, and there's like multiple cables. You got to stick it in.
But did you get motion sickness?
In certain situations, yeah, but it depended on the game you were playing. Like Batman Arkham VR, which is probably my favourite VR game. I mean, it's not like mind-blowing game, but it's only about an hour long, but that you can play, you can be in that for hours, and you'll be fine. And some of the mini games that you got on like the demo disc that it came with, like sort of there's the VR tennis game and things like that, you can play all day without any issues. But there are games like I played Gran Turismo Sport, had a little VR segment, and I played that, and I could only do like one lap, and then I'd get motion sickness. Same with Wipeout VR is I couldn't even get past a lap, because also you're kind of floating around. It's like flying cars. I couldn't even get past the lap without until the motion sickness hit.
Yeah, I was almost a little bit embarrassed because I was like, I took it off straight away, and I was just like, oh, I've got to sit here. Sorry, I really didn't feel well, and I didn't feel well for about another half an hour. After using one.
Yeah, I think probably the worst one for me was a game called Ultra Wings, which is like basically Pilot Wings.
Oh, really?
Very similar to Pilot Wings. So kind of, I think the team that made it, they said this is basically Pilot Wings. That's what influenced us. And that you could barely get through a couple of minutes because you're obviously flying around in a plane. So yeah, that was a real struggle. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I haven't tried VR2. I suppose there's not really a lot of places that demo it, to be honest. So I've never really had that. I've come across any situation where I was able to play it, but I'll be willing to pick it up and give it a go. And like I said, if I had 700, 800 quid burning a hole in my pocket and I wanted to get a console, I would probably do that versus a PS5 Pro. I've got the disc drive. I've got just pretty
exactly. It sounds like such a better offer, really, doesn't it? Than the but my point still stands that if you want more power and the latest processors and the most frame rates and stuff, unfortunately you have to spend more money. And, things in this world, they can't just be cheaper because I just want them to be cheaper.
And it's interesting to see how it actually fares when it comes out. I mean, when is it actually? Is it already out? When is it actually being released?
I don't know. Actually,
you're going to hear me typing away again to find it out. Here we go.
It's got a notification on Facebook. Trevor's posted 2 links.
Oh dear. Here we go. So you've got like the regular one obviously came out at the end of November, and then the Pro's got its own. I'm literally looking at good old Wikipedia right now, and it's really not showing anything about the Pro. Here we go, I found it. It was announced obviously on September the 10th, and it's going to be out when November the 7th.
Oh, okay.
November the 7th. Yeah, I just can't see it selling that well. I mean, obviously the PS4 Pro sold enough, and I don't think that did gangbusters by any stretch of the imagination. The PS4 Pro obviously did enough back in the day to convince them that it's worth doing Pro versions of consoles. But
they might just be thinking, well, actually, this is just going to be for us to, I don't know, potentially have a bit of a 10% of
extra bit of cash.
Might buy this one. It'll just give people who want to spend a bit more money an option for them. And if you think about it, you just got a big bonus from work or whatever, and you're 25 years old and you like playing consoles, and you've got a 50-inch TV, and you walk into a store. You might go, oh, I'll get the Pro one. Yeah, I'll get that. And maybe it's just for that sort of dynamic or demographic of people.
Yeah, I'm not sure someone. I mean, it sounds like you're describing someone fairly casual. And to be honest, I think if they saw both units, and they'd go up to the salesperson, this is like a Curry's or somewhere, and they go up to the salesperson and say, what's the difference between these two then, mate? And they'd be like, oh, yeah, this one has got much better ray tracing. And they'd be like, what's that? Oh, it just makes the games look better. Okay, can you show me that? And they'll be like, well, okay, here's a picture of Ratchet and Clank on PS5. Here it is on PS5 Pro. Okay, so what's the difference in price? Oh, this other one's hundreds of pounds more. Oh, screw that, mate. I'll just go for the regular one. Especially if it's someone casual, they'll be like, oh, what are you going to play on it? FIFA. So they're like someone like that. They're unlikely to really. It's kind of a very strange niche, isn't it? So people that are hardcore enough about graphics, but not hardcore enough to buy a PC. So it's I'm not sure how many people there is. There probably was, a few people that perhaps aren't like that were buying the PS4 Pro because it wasn't extortionately priced. But there's going to be even less, surely, than there was then, and that was a niche. who would be willing to drop 700 quid on a PS5 Pro. It'll sell. I don't think it'll be absolute catastrophic,
No, but
Sega 32X kind of level.
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll sell well enough for them to want to try it again after this. I could be wrong. I didn't think the Portal would be that popular, but now I see that the PlayStation Portal does fill a gap that there wasn't really. Well, I guess you had mobile phones you could stream to and you could stick in a controller, but for some reason I'm not sure that's been a big thing for PS5 or PS4 streaming them to mobile phones. I see all the adverts on Facebook and stuff, people buying Backbone controllers and stuff, but I don't think a lot of people have really done it. And then the Portal has made them think, oh, that's a cool way of doing it. And probably is a much better experience than an app on your phone. So I can kind of see why that would be popular, even though it's not the optimal streaming solution. I mean, to have it kind of go to the internet and talk to your PS5 through the internet is bizarre. I mean, if it should just be doing a Wii U gamepad type thing, shouldn't it? Where it's literally getting the video signal beamed to it directly from the console. Maybe that's what they'll do with the PS6.
I mean, the Wii U, I used to play that quite often, just on the controller.
It was great.
And exactly, and I never had a concept of actually how that worked, and I just thought, it's just it's streaming from that box to here, and then when I'm in the same room, it works. It didn't feel like there was any sort of lag with it at all. And someone might say, well, actually, yeah, if you really analyse it, there is a bit of lag. Okay, fair enough. I couldn't notice it.
I think there was barely any. I think there was some of the least amount of lag we've ever seen in that kind of device.
Exactly. That was made by Nintendo.
Yeah.
So Sony, who obviously I like to think they got a much better sort of online infrastructure and everything. I thought, well, actually, if that's the same as the Wii U, that'd be brilliant. But then everyone's like, well, actually, yeah, you can just have the app on your phone, which you've already got, stick a Backbone on it, and it's a better experience.
I think that's why we're all a bit baffled as to why the Portal is sold better. People just want the DualSense controller, I guess, or the larger screen than maybe they've got on their iPhone, which is like a 6-inch screen or whatever. Yeah. And if it was £100, then I'd be like, that's kind of a casual. That's not much more than a controller then.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, the price it's at, I'm still a bit baffled as to why it's kind of as popular as it is. I mean, there are rumours now that I was listening to the latest DF Direct, today's one actually.
I was early actually, yeah.
Yeah, and I think they were mentioning that Sony are looking to produce several different types of sizes of SoC for the PS6, and people think that means there'll be like an S and an X, or a regular Pro, and then maybe even a handheld. So they might be getting back into the handheld sort of.
I think we've talked about sort of prices at the PlayStation 5, and then a few episodes ago we talked about how it sort of reached its sort of limit, and they've sort of said, let's say there's 100 million people in the world that want to buy a console or whatever, or maybe it's more than that, but it sort of reached its limit. So then I was sort of thinking about
in terms of like sales, like the hackers.
Exactly. Yeah. And then we talked today about the reason for that, and that's because the PlayStation 5 isn't dropping in price. So what I think they should do is actually have, we've got the PlayStation 5, you've got the PlayStation 5 Pro, and then you got the PlayStation 5 Lite. So the actual Lite comes out at, $250, $200, and it goes, okay.
Probably can do like 1080p. Or,
exactly. It aims for 1080p gaming, and then you think, well, actually, and I don't want to sound derogatory or whatever, but then it's like, well, it's the latest technology. It will play really, really well. But then if you're in countries where actually, I haven't got a 4K screen, or it's maybe a little bit more attainable because you've only got a 1080p screen. So then you actually go down that route and you can play all the latest games, but you can have less expensive hardware to accommodate for the less pixels that got to be sort of pushed around the screen. So
that would solve the problem of prices not coming down as well. You've got that cheaper model there all times for those people who don't want to spend £500 on a console. Yeah,
exactly. And if you think about, little Johnny in his bedroom, if he gets a PlayStation 5 Lite and then he sticks it into his 23-inch 1080p TV, if he sticks a PS5 Pro into that, he's not going to get any benefit of all this updated performance and stuff. But then, he spent £700 for the privilege, and I think that would just be a really sort of nice sort of sweet spot for people to get into the PlayStation ecosystem, and basically a lower price.
Yeah, I mean, they've probably seen that I think the S has sold pretty well, isn't it? So there's £250, which is a really good price for a current gen console. If they could make a PS6 Lite or a PS6 regular or whatever PS6S, let's just call it that, so people understand the analogy. For like 250 quid or whatever that will be in for 4 years time, probably more like 300.
I think they should do it with the PS5. Do it now.
Oh well, yeah.
So then they've got three sort of console, the light, the medium, and the pro, or whatever. However they. Well,
the ideal scenario is that they could have just done that with the current one they have out. They could make that 250 quid, and then the pro would have been £500. Obviously, they can't have it work at those prices at all, so we're not doing it.
They can't make the numbers add up. So that's when they've got to, cut down the silicon, cut down, and let's say it comes out with, 500 gig of storage or whatever. It doesn't come out with a CD drive or Blu-ray drive. Yeah. And then it's basically £200. And then it's this will sort of give you 60 frames a second at 1080p. This is the machine that you want. And they go, well, actually, that is. I've got to buy that for my son, my daughter, whatever. It's more of a bit of a no-brain type price. They'll have a PlayStation 5. They can play all the games they want with their friends. They can play online. They can do all of this stuff. They'll get into the PlayStation world, and away they go.
Yeah, and I think it's a way of getting around that, console sales have reached their maximum limit of 300 million people or whatever it is, because if you have three different models of PlayStation, a handheld, the lower spec system, £300, handheld, £400, but performs about the same as the lower spec, but obviously it's going to be more expensive because you've got a screen and all that stuff. And then you've got Pro of, £600 or £900. Then you've kind of, you might be able to eke out more potential sales, because there'll be people, when there's just one unit, it's only going to be the people that are happy to get that one unit are the ones that are going to get it. So that's got an upper limit. But then there's people that, if they had a handheld out, that like myself, would get the handheld, and that would be all they would ever want. There'd be people that don't want to pay £400 or £500 extra for the regular standard console, but they're quite happy just to game at 1080p, so they'll get the cheaper one. So you're touching these different types of customer, touching the customer, not in that way, but you're reaching out to those customer types that otherwise would just be completely passed by. We're just having a singular unit at a fixed price, So I can see them doing
exactly. That. And you've got to think about, the global world or whatever. So you might have someone who's got loads of money, lives in New York, whatever, or lives in Dubai, and then get the £700 one. Brilliant, that's the one you should get. But then you've got someone who loves gaming, but they might live in
Brazil,
and I don't want to Brazil, perfect example. Or they live in Egypt or somewhere, or they live in a bit of a less developed country. And then they go, well, actually, that's now in my price range. And then I think Sony think, well, actually, they're going to sign up for PlayStation Plus to get the online membership, and they'll buy games, and then they'll buy a DLC, and then when they get a bit older, they might buy the more advanced machines, and so on. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they've got that market. They've got the lower spec machine could just be sold in those regions where presumably they're not really selling much of anything. Because these are somewhere like Brazil, you end up paying triple, for what we pay for a console. So,
well, that's their import taxes, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, they have insane import taxes of stuff that isn't produced in their own countries and things like that. So they have to pay these insane prices. Whereas a lower spec system could be the mainstream one there, and again that'd be sales that they otherwise wouldn't get. So I think that would probably be a good approach. And perhaps that is what they're going to do. And like I said, they probably have seen what Microsoft had done with the Series S. I mean, I know a lot of people aren't the biggest fans of the Series S. People say, it brings up barriers for the developers that they can't go all out developing for the highest spec because they have to accommodate the S. I mean, I don't really care about that. I'm like, they'll figure it out. Really impacted things dramatically. So.
I think people think it's a perfect world if there's just one console and you can just play on that one console.
Well,
that would be a terrible world because there wouldn't be competition and so on. But
absolutely. Just
before we finish, I want to sort of touch upon lazy game reviews. Now, I've watched him for, as I'm sure you have as well, for absolutely years. It's Clint, isn't it? Clint.
It is.
Yeah,
it
Clint.
Is indeed, yeah.
And I read on Twitter the other day. So by the time this comes out, hopefully he's in a much better place. But he's okay. But a hurricane has gone through sort of the Carolinas. I don't really know geography too well in America, but that's sort of like the hurricane area. And I think it's terribly sort of almost sort of destroyed his house and sort of ripped the roof off. And I know he's done, some sort of amazing sort of tours of his house where he's shown all the boxed PC games he's got, and then all this old hardware that he keeps all in immaculate condition and things like that. And obviously it's affected lots of people there. And it was on the BBC that over 100 people have died, but luckily, touch wood, he's okay. But I think his house has been, I think he's lost his roof and bits and pieces. But just really thoughts going out to him. And
oh man, yeah,
it's. I think I think Trev, we're lucky living in the south of England, where we might get a little bit of a windy day one day or something like that, and we don't have those kind of storms over here. Touch wood.
Yeah. We obviously we get some floods and things in this country, which is terrible, obviously for the people involved, but it doesn't really affect me and you living in London. It might get a bit rainy, and I know we're southern softies, and we all the trains get cancelled when there's a drop of rain, and what's the joke? If there's a storm warning, it's like everybody stay at home, red alert, south of Birmingham, but north of Birmingham, it's like, just put your big coat on. So that's kind of as bad as it gets for us. But obviously, Clint is kind of, for us, especially personally, probably, one of the many people that have inspired us to sort of start doing what we're doing anyway, in terms of putting a podcast out there and getting our own thoughts and opinions on video games, old and new. And Clint has inspired, certainly probably a few retro purchases in my lifetime since I've been watching him, because of his incredible, videos, and he does some of the best content on YouTube. And I think just an all-round nice guy as well.
Saying that, I love his content, but when he does his Sims stuff, I can't get my head around it. I'm like, who wants to play The Sims?
I've never played any of the Sims games in my life. SimCity, obviously, it's made by the same people.
I love SimCity.
Love SimCity,
But The Sims, and I think a couple of weeks ago he did a bit of a rant about The Sims 4, and they said, they're not updating it, or they are updating it, but not making The Sims 5, and I was like, I don't really play The Sims. It doesn't really bother me, but he was very passionate about. The Sims 4, and that's a real genre of games that he really likes to play, so that's great. But I think I like all his other choices of games. He loves, Unreal Tournament and that kind of like arena shooter, and he's done some great videos about upgrading old hardware, and he likes putting wood grain on everything, and
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
a bit of a legend. Legend is Clint. We love him to bits, and yeah, hopefully, he'll be able to get through the little sort of crisis he's going through, which is very real, and we wish him all the best. And hopefully, he'll be back making videos again soon that we can all enjoy, like we always have from Clint. So yeah, best of luck. Best of luck, Clint.
I think someone put it quite well. Is like, it's a terrible thing that's happened, but he'll get some great stories out of it.
There'll be a few videos on it, I'm sure.
There'll be some sort of videos about it, and fingers crossed once the sun's come out and the winds everything's gone. Hopefully
there'll be a brighter day.
It'll be a brighter day for him.
Right, well, on that note, we're at the end of the show. So Stu, where can you find us on the interwebs?
We're everywhere. So search Console Shock on YouTube, Console Shock on Facebook, and then any sort of podcast client you can find us on. Again, search Console Shock, and then we're on Twitter as well. Again, search Console Shock.
Cool. So thank you everybody again for listening to the show. We hope you really enjoyed it. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.
Take it easy, guys. Bye bye.